Okay, good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. My name is Rita Rivera, and I am the incoming 33rd District PTA Financial Secretary. Welcome to our basic financial workshop. We are so glad that you've been able to join us this morning. We want to share a few housekeeping notes, first of all, about the Zoom meeting before we get started. We're asking that all participants please mute yourselves during the presentation. Please ask questions in the chat section, and we will review them and answer the questions during and after the presentations. We will be sharing video segments covering the basic portions of the PowerPoint that we shared with you. The other parts of the PowerPoint presentation will serve as a reference for when you're ready for more PTA finance information. So we are not going through every single page of it. After each video segment, we will have some polls and other activities, and we will answer as many questions as possible that have been submitted. We have recorded trainings about budgets, audits, and tax filings that are posted also on our 33rd YouTube channel. And our training team for this morning is Lisa Uematsu. She's our 33rd District PTA Treasurer. Emmy Morimoto is our 33rd District PTA Financial Secretary. Flora Farzad is our 33rd District PTA Tax and Government Filings Consultant. And Margaret Liu is our 33rd District PTA Incoming Financial Reviewer. Hey, we're going to go ahead and get going with our pre-recorded video segments. So for your reference, on the handout that was emailed to you, those will begin on pages 17 to 21.
Handling of receipts. Here's a sample cash verification form from the California State PTA Toolkit. This form is used for any funds collected by your PTA. Some of you might have variations of this form, but to highlight some of the features, here, there's a place for the counters to sign, and at least 2 PTA members, one of whom should be an officer or chairman, must count the money received. And people counting money shouldn't be related by blood, marriage, or reside in the same household. Now here, over on this part, it should be co-signed by the person taking custody of the funds. So some PTAs have a financial secretary who might do this. Others who don't have a financial secretary could have the treasurer sign this part. The auditor should not be any one of these signatures. They should not be counting the money because they'll be looking over the books and examining your organization's records at the end of the audit period. So once this cash verification form is completed, give copies to all signers. Sometimes a photocopy machine may not readily be available, so taking a picture with your phone is documentation as well, so that works. Additionally, if the deposit is for membership, the memberships must be reconciled. So here, there's a separate area on the form to indicate the number of memberships collected, and the amount in donations received. So this total here, the grand total, should add up to the grand total of the cash verification form here in this section, grand total. So please always remember to use the cash verification forms. This is how we verify money received by having at least 2 counters and their signatures, and follow the chain of custody of money. So the chain of custody of money, meaning from the time that the money is received and counted and taken to the bank for deposit. So when counting the money, you might also want to consider putting information such as the student's name in the memo of the check, so that if there's a problem with the check, like as if it were to bounce, for example, you have a way to trace or contact the check maker. So coordinating with the event chair or the folks filling out this form would be a good idea so that they could include that information on the checks as well. Here's an example scenario of a situation we might find ourselves in. So your event's over and it's late and you kind of look around and there's nobody else around besides you, maybe a couple of others besides your husband and your 80-year-old son. So you're thinking, wow, this is great. My husband can sign and he can be the additional signature on the cash verification form. Great, right? No, not a great idea. So why is this not a great idea? So when counting the money, we want to always plan ahead. As mentioned previously, at least 2 PTA members, one of whom should be an officer or a chairman, must count the monies received. The people counting the money shall not be related by blood, marriage, or reside in the same household. If the money can't be deposited immediately or like a night drop isn't available, plan ahead for the safekeeping of your money with the school principal to use the school safe until you're able to deposit in the bank. Never take the money home. Be sure to complete the cash verification form, document the amount being deposited or being left in the school safe, and to have 2 signatures on the form. If you decide to do a night drop at the bank, depending on your community, you might be able to request law enforcement escort. So this slide here is about electronic check deposits. If your bank offers mobile or online banking, you can make such deposits if your deposits are comprised solely of checks. Keep in mind that you'll still need a deposit receipt, whether in the form of email, text message, or mailed paper copy for documentation of the deposit. Be sure to attach that receipt or scanned image or photo to the cash verification form. Also, your bank might have a policy on the maximum number of electronic deposits, so be sure to check with them because you could be assessed fees. And only check signers on the bank account should have access to that electronic deposit feature. So consider ahead of time which of these check signers should have access or will have access to this feature. Making deposits, other information. There should be no commingling of funds. For example, your PTA should not deposit funds into other organization accounts, such as the schools or the school district's account. And also do not deposit funds into a personal account. Be sure to prepare deposit slips, a duplicate, or make a copy. The original goes to the bank and the duplicate goes to the treasurer for their records. Mark checks for deposit only with the PTA account number. And what do you do if you get a non-sufficient funds check? Well, you'll want to develop and use a system to identify these checks. So the system could actually include what we discussed previously regarding adding more information such as student names to the check memo line.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? I don't see anything in the chat apart from Priscilla answering the video's question of what's wrong with this? So yes, who's it? Georgia's husband and son cannot help count money because they are related. So good catch. So are there any questions related to deposits or receipts? Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share a little exercise here. And of course, if you come up with any other questions, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat. So what's wrong with this cash verification form? There are no math errors, so don't be, whipping out your calculators. But if you find anything that seems out of order, feel free to go ahead and drop that in the chat. Oh, check that out. A whole bunch of people said missing the second signature. Good job. Missing currency. Yes. You'll see here, it's got a total of $64, but it doesn't break it down into what kind of bills it was. Oh, here we go. 3 weeks between dates. Very good, Sarah. So for those of you who are unsure what she means by that, the cash verification was initially filled out September 1st, but apparently the person that double checked it before taking it to the bank is the date here is September 22nd. So that is not prompt enough. We want to make sure that we're depositing stuff quickly. So I think Flora, is that all of them? I think that is, but
yeah,
okay.
That sounds fine.
All righty, okay. I'm gonna stop sharing that. Let's see, I'm gonna go ahead and do this. And share one more interactive. Which of those is true? And we'll give it about, I don't know, 30 seconds or so.
There is a good question in the chat we can talk about after the poll.
Okay, good. And I'm going to go ahead and close this poll up in a few seconds. There we go. And I'm going to share the results. Okay. Can you see that, Flora, and discuss?
Yes. Mm-hmm. An auditor can count money. No, they cannot, because the auditor will be auditing whoever counted money, so they would be auditing themselves. So no, auditors cannot count money. If the student council has a fundraiser, PTA can collect and deposit the funds. No, that's called commingling of funds. The PTA has a very specific tax exempt purpose in which they can collect funds, and they cannot collect funds on behalf of another entity, which may have a different tax exempt purpose. And also the PTA has to have ultimate control over money that goes into the bank account. And in this case, it does not. It's just like a pass-through, and pass-throughs are for just within the organization. So no, do not collect funds on behalf of the school, the student council, or anyone else. PTAs are not allowed to have petty cash funds. That's correct. They're not allowed to have petty cash funds. Some people confuse petty cash funds with change funds. Petty cash funds you can expend from, but change funds is just for the purpose of giving change. You may, change the bills, to make it more useful, but it will always stay at the same amount. It will never be expended.
I'll stop sharing that. And let's see. Why don't you go ahead, Flora, and answer Kelly's question?
Yes. To verify, the cash verification form is time-based, not event-based. So you can have multiple events items, but in a short period of time. No, that's absolutely not. It is event-based. You'll see on the top of the cash verification form, it says activity, not activities. So you're supposed to report each activity on a separate cash verification form. So you can't put like membership, dining, nights out, or anything all grouped together, because then you can't see exactly what goes into each activity. So there would be one cash verification form for each activity. If you have a change fund and you want to return it after a carnival, that will have to go on a separate cash verification form. You don't want to commingle it with revenue that you made, your revenue deposit. So everything needs to go on a separate form. Okay, how can you have change funds? Well, you have a change fund and then you have a standing change fund. So a change fund is like for a carnival. If you want to sell tickets and everything, you need change. And so you would initiate a check request. It must be a check request. Someone can't go in the bank and withdraw cash. And it would be to a specific person, usually the chairperson of the event, because someone has to be responsible for that money. And so you would use that change fund during the event. In this case, it would be returned after the event on a cash verification form. So if you have a $500 change fund, you have a check request for $500, then you have a cash verification form in which you're returning it for $500. A standing change fund is if you have spiritware, for example, and you sell it every week. And it's pretty onerous to get a check request, get a change fund, and then return it every week. So that's called a standing change fund. And a check is issued toward the beginning of the year to, like, say, the chairperson of spiritware. And they are responsible for that fund. And so they use it every week. They make sure it's $500 or whatever it's supposed to be and return it to the safe or the lockbox until the next week. It should be returned on a cash verification form after your last sales, if you want a standing change fund. So usually the unit I'm working at, we're going to be returning it next week because we're cutting off sales. And so it should be returned prior to June 30th. We should close out that standing change fund because the spiritware person has changed and you don't want to sit around over the summer and things like that. So that's what change funds are. So we can't keep about $100 change in a lockbox at the school. They have to be withdrawn The day of sales, we need the change for. Like I said, you can get the change fund a little ahead of time. It doesn't have to be on the same day as the carnival, for example, but you would not need that change on hand. And yes, you have to keep it secure always. If you're not using the change fund, it should be in a secure place, such as a lockbox or a safe. What do you mean when we need to do a check request for a change fund? Like I said, you have to assign responsibility for that change fund, and the responsible person would be the check that is made out to, for example, the Spiritware chairperson. I've seen it where some people just go in the bank and withdraw funds and some kind of random withdrawal, and it can't be tracked, and that's not what we do. We need to physically go inside a bank during banking hours to get cash. Yeah, you'll need you want to establish how many ones, how many fives, how many tens, depending on your activity. And yes, you would take the check to the bank, you would cash it, and then ask them for the change that you need to equal the amount, $500 or whatever it is. We are never allowed to use an ATM. No, you shouldn't have an ATM card. If you do, it should be for deposits only. It should never be for withdrawals. Because the reason is that disbursements have to go through a process we're going to talk about, and withdrawing funds from the bank is a disbursement and it's not going through the appropriate process.
I think that's it. So Rita, you want to introduce the next section?
Okay, our next section is on expenditures, and on your printout slides, it's slides 9 through 15.
Can we write this check? So when we have to pay bills, we need to know whether we can actually write the check. And the California PTA has actually issued this great flow chart, which I love because I love flow charts. And you just spell around on the outside. And if you actually stay on the outside track, you could write the check. So is the check approved in the budget? And has the expense been authorized by the association? And has a completed payment authorization form with receipts attached been submitted? You do not have to write that. They should be submitting their own payment authorizations. And has the payment authorization been signed by both the president and the secretary? If all these steps are true, then they can write the check. And if any of these other things if there's ever a no, then they have to go fix that before the check can be written. So that's a great tool to know when you can write the check. And this is a very similar, if you're not into flowcharts, if you prefer words, this is kind of the same process of spending money. Has the money been budgeted? Has it been released by the association? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Has it been authorized by the board? Has the payment authorization request for reimbursement been submitted, complete with receipts and invoices and signed? And if so, then you can actually spend the money. Now, once you've passed a budget, that doesn't necessarily mean you can spend the money. The money actually has to be released at release is what we call it, at an association meeting. So if you know you're going to have some expenses coming up, you need to authorize the actual expenditure of it at the association meeting. So for instance, if you have a meeting in September, an association meeting, you should be releasing all your expenses that you're going to incur between September and your next association meeting. And if that's going to be, say, December, then you only need to release what you're going to spend through December. So for instance, if you're budgeted $16 a month for Zoom, that would be almost probably $192 for the year, but you only need to release the 3 months that you're going to be spending: October, November, December, maybe 4, depending on how the timing is. But you only need to release what you're going to spend at that time. So that is releasing of funds. If you're going to spend it all, of course, release it all. So let's go back to writing the check. Payment authorizations must be completed for all expenses. The payment authorization should include the date, the check number, the payee, the amount to be paid, the budget line with the signatures of the president and the secretary. And the receipts must be attached. So all these things must be filled out completely, must add up completely. All the receipts must be there. And it's very important that the president and the secretary both sign. Because the secretary is signing in part so that it is acknowledged that it has been approved and in the minutes. And they're both, the president, of course, needs to know what's going on in the organization, so they should always sign. And everybody on the board is taking responsibility for the payment, not just you or actually even these individuals, but by signing, they're signing for the responsibility. So everything is very important to have complete signatures. When you write the check, you need to have 2 signatures. Usually you check your bylaws to see who can be a check signer. You should never sign a blank check. I know that people busy and working, sometimes you're going to have an expense, but you don't know exactly what it is. So you are tempted to have somebody sign a check so that you can just pay the bill, but it should never be signed a blank check because you don't know what is going to actually be written on that check. So that's a big never do. And never paying cash. This could be very tempting to do too if you're working a snack bar and someone comes in with a bunch of receipts that they bought the spam or whatever for whatever you're selling. And hey, can I just get reimbursed right now? Because you got all the cash from the day's sales. And that is nothing, you should never do that. You need to keep your expenses clear and have a paper trail so that you know exactly how much that snack bar costs to run. And just keep everything recorded properly. And you should always use a permanent ink pen, such as a Uniball, so that to guard against fraud. And some of these other procedures also guard against fraud because there's been issues where people have gotten a spam email that looks real. And if you go through all these procedures and actually have everybody sign and double check everything, they'll say, hey, no, I didn't actually send that email to you. So that's another reason why you want to make sure everything is properly signed and reviewed by multiple people. So on this slide, we have an example of what should not be done. At a quick glance, perhaps you can't tell what's wrong. But what you should not do is write a check to yourself, basically, and sign and have yourself sign it. There usually in your bylaws, there should be 3 check signers. So if I need a reimbursement for something I've bought, I would have the other 2 people sign it. Not me, Madam President, and my friend Andy. So that's what we should. So that's a rule that we try to follow in PTA, is to never sign our own checks. And electronic payments, PTAs should not pay using credit cards and debit cards. It's okay to reimburse people who have used a credit card. So if our friend at the snack bar had paid with her credit card to buy all the snacks for the snack bar, it's okay to write her a check to reimburse her, but the PTA should not be going out with credit cards and buying things. If you can get a deposit-only ATM card from your bank, that's okay, but it should not be an ATM card that allows withdrawals, only deposits. So, and this is very convenient if, late night after the snack bar closes, you can then go quickly make the deposit and not have the money sitting around. So that would be a great thing if possible. But some banks don't have that. So, and electronic payments with bank bill payment services are okay, but it has to be bank bill payment services like either banks and large financial processors. No person-to-person apps. So Venmo is person-to-person, so that's not allowed. But you can do Zelle, you can do PayPal, and Square is allowed. Now, electronic payments still require all the checks and balances. So we have an authorization for payment via electronic, and it's almost like a check. It requires the two signatures, two check signers. So president and treasurer, whoever the check signers are, and must be filled out very much the same way as a check, with a date, who you're paying, what you're paying for, any receipts that you have attached. And so it's basically the same amount of paperwork as writing a check. It's just a different process. And you have to do this form in addition to the payment authorization. So, like I say, it's basically the same amount of paperwork as a check.
All righty. So I see there are some questions in the chat. So if Rita or Flora wants to start in on those, that would be great.
Okay. Do keep records of the recipients that are submitted with check requests. How long should they be kept for? There is a retention schedule for the different documents in the CAPA toolkit, and I know some clever colleague of mine will probably throw that up in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Flora.
I'm sorry? Oh.
Thank you, Flora. I just put the link in there.
Oh, okay. And there's different times. As a rule, it's 7 years if between if they can do an IRS audit. It usually goes back no more than 7 years. So if you just want one date to make it easy, all your files are together and whatnot, then it's probably good to keep everything 7 years. But yes, you definitely want to keep, assuming you're meaning the check requests, yes, definitely keep the check request with the documentation, the supporting invoices or receipts. And if you want to make it easy, it's every 7 years, but there are different time frames. I believe minutes are kept like forever, but you can refer to that retention schedule and it will tell you. So what happens if the association approved the budget at the beginning of the school year, but now that you ask for release of funds for a dance, let's say, new people who are attending the meeting don't agree with the amount? You can they can put a motion on the floor to say that they want to decrease the budget if they don't agree with the budget that's already been approved. A motion can be put on the floor to decrease the budget, and there will be discussion and it will be voted upon. So budgets are plans. They can be changed, based upon circumstances. And if you take the vote and the majority of people want to reduce the budget, then that's what's to be done. And then the release would be based on the new budget. If it's just like a few people and they object or whatever, but they're not the majority, then you would proceed based upon the motion that was denied or whatever. Then you would proceed with your release of funds. But everyone needs to be heard at the meeting, and budgets are meant to be changed. If you should be reviewing your budget to actuals at least quarterly, but monthly is great. And the board really isn't doing its fiduciary responsibility unless it's changing the budget to match reality and changing times. Okay, I hope that answers the question. Approved date means the date it was released, correct? I'm referring to the bottom of the payment authorization form. On the payment authorization forms, there's 3 squares. And it says membership approved activities. That means the budget was approved. And it says the release of funds. And the third little square, and that's referring to committees that prepare plans and submit to the board for approval. I believe it's the third box is board approval. And so if you go through that step, that means that the board has initially approved a committee plan. Nothing's approved for payment, but they say, oh, okay, that sounds good. And the reason for that is, for example, if a committee wants to have a speaker, this is, really popular speaker now, and they put that in the plan. If it goes to the board, the principal might say, oh, we have that speaker coming next week. So committees can make recommendations, but they can never make approval of expenditures or anything like that. And so the bottom one, which you're referring to, is when the budget's been approved, the funds have been released, and a check needs to be written. And so either the board or association can approve the authorization for payment. So these are the different steps: budget approved, released, authorized for payment. And so that's what the bottom one says. And if you look at the bottom one, it says meeting minutes. It doesn't say board, it doesn't say association, because you can do it at either one. So those are the meeting minutes that said, I move to authorize payment in the amount of whatever. And so you can't write the check until you get that authorization. And that's on the can we write this check sort of in the beginning. Is there any wiggle room for the amount of funds approved to release? Let's say association approved $1,000 for a dance, but we spent $1,050. What then? Again, you can make a motion to increase the budget by $50, $1,050, and then if that's approved, then you can release the $1,050. So it's based upon the approval of a budget increase, and then you can release it, and then it may be authorized for expenditure. So it's okay to use Zelle? Yes. Right, Lisa?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, it is. How long do we have to keep paper copies of items? We have boxes filled from years ago. This causes space issues. Now everything is digital. Like I said, the paper files should be kept for 7 years if you want to keep everything at the same retention time. But I do believe bank reconciliations, treasury reports, those may be 1 year. And so please check that retention schedule. I haven't memorized that one, but I believe some items are 1 year and then you can get rid of them. So you shouldn't be having a lot of paper. So that should cut down on your paper. No one uses cash now or checks. Okay, that's great. If you're working for a campus that doesn't have cash or checks, then you won't have any deposits, and that makes it easy for you. We need to know that this training is for all 300 and some units in 33rd District. So you may have the great circumstance of no cash or checks, but we have to address other units who do. And so that's why we cover these particular procedures. I hope that answers your question. It definitely makes things more complicated for parent volunteers. Okay, well, sorry about that, but PTAs, mothers conduct business from the trunks of their car. We have to have certain policies and procedures in place in order to safeguard PTA assets, which is cash. And so it may look cumbersome, and a lot of the approvals that we were talking about, it's because it's the association's money. It's not the board's money. It's not our money. It's the association's money. And so the board has a fiduciary responsibility. They cannot spend money or, make decisions as far as the final destination of funds. It's the association, because it's their money. And so it looks like there's a lot of rules and regulations, but over I guess you could say the last 125 years, this is what has evolved, and it seems to work for the most part. But yeah, I agree with you. It's complicated, but I believe necessary to take actions. And our insurance is based upon these policies and procedures that we're presenting to you. We do have insurance for loss, theft, fraud, whatever. But there's criteria that we need to meet, and our PTA policies and procedures meets this criteria in order to be reimbursed for any loss that may occur one way or another. You gave an example of spiritware chairperson. How long can chairperson serve in the position? It's the same as any other position, as the elected positions, appointed positions. If this is an appointed position, it's the same thing. You really apply for it every year, and you cannot be in the same position for 2 consecutive years. How are Square or Venmo transactions managed for point of sale? Managed for point of sale. Do you know what that means?
Well, first of all, I'm going to jump in and say we can't accept Venmo because that's a person-to-person application. So it's doesn't have all the safeguards that a bank application or some of these other big like payment platforms have. So yes, I guess Katie, if you wanted to unmute yourself and clarify that.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. We use Square or Venmo sometimes at point of sale, to make it easier for parents to spend more money. And I guess if Venmo, or I'm sorry, if you said Venmo is not acceptable, I guess maybe what we've had in the past is maybe one parent is donating their Venmo account and then they collect the funds and submit it as a cash, I guess. I'm guessing is how we have been using it in the past with our school. Or does that sound kosher to do?
No, because it's funds that are collected on behalf of the PTA at the point of sale, now I understand what you're saying, need to go directly to the PTA bank account. It cannot go through another person.
It can't cross through like a parent's account and then they're like, I'm collecting it for you and here's the Venmo money I collected.
But then there's loss of control over the sale. So.
I see.
Yes.
So, and then I think we do have a Square account I know we do have a Square account with our PTA for sales. And so that I assume is just set up to go direct as a direct deposit then, and I have to fill out paperwork after events to reconcile those purchases or those revenues.
Yeah, those would go into the Square account, and there's a lot of reporting off the Square account that the treasurer will pull off the reports, and those can be used to back up the deposits. And the deposits are made directly to the bank account. So that's what we were talking about, goes directly to the bank account. Be sure if you're a treasurer and you're posting, see you have to, when the bank account is updated, you have to post that to your records in order to reconcile, right? And so you want to make sure that you're posting the gross income to Spiritware Income, for example. And then the fee will go to a Square fee account, an expense account. You don't want to post the net that's on your bank account to income. That should be separated between income and
I get it. I think because there's a fee associated with Square transactions.
Exactly. Yes.
So I think typically when we do a Square transaction, we inform the parent who's making the purchase that we will be adding $1 extra to cover the fees associated with any transactions. I think we're pretty upfront with that when we do Square transactions to try to recoup those fees. I have to check in with, I seem to recall from past events that we sometimes did that, but I can't, don't quote me on it.
Oh, okay, I won't. Okay, if you collect money to reimburse the unit for Square expenses, that should be a reduction of expense. You would abate your expense account. Do you know what I mean? Like, it should decrease your expense because you're not incurring that expense. You're getting money back. Okay. That's accounting. I'm sorry. Okay. So we use Stripe, which is also okay. Yeah, I think Totem used to use Stripe. I'm not sure, but Totem, I think, uses Stripe. Is that all?
There's one more, but you know what? I'm going to launch the poll, and then maybe we can talk about this one question that Summer has. How's that? Okay, so this one's got 3 yes or no questions on there. Scroll down if you know to see all of them. And Summer mentions, you mentioned Zelle is allowed, but isn't it person to person, similar to Cash App and Venmo? Zelle is actually a sort of set up by a bank. It's like the Bank of America application. And so it's got certain protections that Venmo does not. And then businesses are allowed to have Zelle accounts. And that's sort of linked up with the bank account. Even though I think Venmo sort of has like an option for business, it really is linked to a particular person, right? It would have to, you would have to specify a specific person's Venmo account in order to link the business account to that. So it is allowed. I know that Zelle is allowed to make transactions between individuals, but then also it's got the added advantage of being backed by a bank, and the business account can be connected directly to it. And it's been 1.5 minutes. I think everyone's probably had time to go through this. I'm just going to go ahead and end the poll now and share the results. And can you go ahead and review that, Flora?
Sure. The principal, well, no need. Everybody got it right. Congratulations. Oh, we're doing a good job in our training because I got the second one. Everybody got the second one right also. Let's go through. Okay. The budget includes $500. The third question. The budget includes $500 for parent education, and the funds are released at the first associated meeting of the year. The Parent Education Committee meets and votes to have a speaker give a presentation and pay her $200. Should the president and secretary sign the payment authorization form? And that would be no also, because remember we said that the committee cannot commit to expenditures. They have to be approved by the board or the association as a authorizing expense. So no, they may have, invited the speaker and stuff, but they can only make recommendations because like we said, maybe there's other plans. So no, even no funds have been budgeted and released, there's still the payment authorization, the third step. That's done by the board or the association. Anyone know which acceptable funds collection app program has the least amount of fees? Square is pretty steep. We also use member plan. Okay. Wow. I know there's a different fee in Square for 501c3 charitable trust, and I do believe it's 2%. Plus 30 cents per transaction, but I'm not sure if April's saying Zelle. Yeah, the nonprofit rate, that's right.
Yeah, because PayPal's nonprofit rate is also less than their generic transaction fees.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so if there are no more questions right now about expenditures, maybe we'll roll into the next video. Rita?
Okay, our next video is on recording transactions and making reports, and that can be found on slides 22 through 28.
Okay, so now that you know about deposits and checks, let's talk about recording those transactions and then also making reports. So there are different ways that you can choose to record your transactions. And if we can go on the next screen, there's some examples. So the top 2 pictures are actually if you want to do your ledger by hand, there's a treasurer's book that's available for sale at the 33rd District office, and you can buy it for, I think, $5. And so if you prefer to write down your transactions, then you can use this. And so you can use a set of pages for each month. And then as you write down each transaction, you're also breaking it down into what category or categories it belongs to. Then on the bottom left, there's a screenshot of My PTEZ. That's an online financial software that's been designed specifically for PTA. You can go ahead and enter your transactions there. And then as long as you have the subscription, and it is a paid subscription, then you will have access to your information that you input. And then the beauty of it is that you can give access to other people to see that information. So then it's not like if you have a treasurer's book and then only one person has possession of it, and if it gets lost, then you're kind of out of luck. But My PTEZ, that information will be there online for you. And then if you want to know more information about that, then you can go to myptez.com for the subscription prices, and then it will allow you to do a 45-day free trial just to see if it works for you and your association. And then on the bottom right-hand section, we have an example of an Excel spreadsheet. So you can also put your information on there. And the only thing is you have to make sure that you have a backup just in case if it's on somebody's computer and their computer crashes and the data is gone, then that's a lot of work that someone's going to have to reconstruct. So hopefully each month you're printing out a hard copy, maybe you're making a backup to a cloud drive or something so that if something happens to the main data entry point, then you still have your information. So we're going to go on to the next slide, which is an example of a financial secretary's report. And so some PTAs will have a financial secretary and a treasurer, and some only have treasurers. So if you're a unit or a council that only has a treasurer, then understand that the financial secretary's duties that we're presenting here also would belong to the treasurer. So the financial secretary's report is going to include the itemized listing of receipts, the itemized list of deposits, and then depending on how your financial secretary's duties are set up at your PTA, possibly an itemized listing of authorizations for payment. And that's if those duties have been assigned to the financial secretary. So if you see on this sample here, then we have the receipts, and they're detailed so that anyone that's looking at that can understand where the money came from. Then you may kind of wonder why the list of receipts is basically the same as the list of deposits. And sometimes what might happen is you may have several different events on a given day. Like maybe you'll be collecting memberships and you'll be selling spiritware. And so you might have two different sets of money on that same day, and you might want to deposit it also together. So in that case, then those two different receipts would actually show up on that same deposit. Okay, so this slide number 25 basically just says what I just told you. So we're just going to hop on over to the next slide, which is a sample of a treasurer's report. Okay, so a couple things we need to make clear that this treasurer's report is going to include all of your deposits and all checks written during that period. So in this example, it's October 2020. And so all the checks that you wrote during that period are going to be on here, even if they haven't cleared the bank. I'll get into that a little later. And then all of your deposits will be on here. Also, you want to make sure that you're including other transactions that are not specifically checks or transfers or deposits, because if you're lucky enough to have enough money to be making interest, then you want to make sure that you include any interest payments from the bank. If you have Totem, you might be receiving membership payments through Totem. And so make sure that you include those. If you have any bank charges, sometimes your bank will charge you a monthly service fee, or perhaps someone bounced a check to you, and so you incur a fee that way. Those are things you're not going to know about through your check paperwork or your deposit paperwork. So that's something where you need to make sure you're looking at your bank statement to catch all of those types of transactions. So when I was talking about make sure you include all the checks that you wrote during the time period, I've seen a lot of treasurer's reports where basically people are just copying the stuff that shows up on that bank statement, and that's not what you want to do. If you have a check that you wrote during the month of October for $500, for example, and it doesn't clear your bank, you still want to make sure that you include it on your report, because that's $500 that you've committed to spend, and so that affects your bottom line. So for your treasurer's reports, you're going to probably be doing two kinds of treasurer's reports. The treasurer's reports that you present at your board meetings, because they happen every month, then your treasurer's report will cover the previous month. However, for your association meetings, if they also occur every month, then you can still be using monthly reports at your association meetings. But quite often, PTAs have association meetings less frequently. So for example, if you have an association meeting in October, and then you have one in January, at your January association meeting, you want to make sure you're not reporting just what happened in the last month, but actually what happened, any activity that happened since the previous association treasurer's report that happened in October. So for both types of treasurer's reports, you want to make sure that you have a treasurer's report for each bank account. Some PTAs may have a general checking account, they may have a savings account, they may have an e-commerce account for electronic deposits and electronic payments. So each of those, the activity for each of those needs to be included in the treasurer's report. And then for each bank account, you must include the beginning and ending balance for that period that you're reporting on. And then all of those transactions, those checks, those deposits, and those extra transactions like interest income, totem deposits, bank charges. And what you want to make sure you do is that you want to make sure that your board members or your association members can see what it is that you're reporting on. So either distribute copies at the meeting, you can, if you're in person, then you can maybe project it on a screen, or if you're having a Zoom meeting, you can actually just share screen and share it and present it there, as opposed to just not giving them anything to refer to and just rattling off all these numbers. You want them to be able to see what's happening in your bank accounts. And so if there are any questions, then they'll be able to refer specifically to any transactions they have questions about. In addition to sharing that financial information with your board and with your association meeting, then we say that you should provide a copy of your unit treasurer's report to your council so that they can check and make sure that you are being sufficiently transparent with your board and your association. In addition to presenting treasurer's reports at the meetings, and there are some other things that you need to make sure you take care of in presenting information to your board. You want to make sure you present your treasurer's report, and if your board has the financial secretary, the financial secretary's report. Also, you want to present expense authorization or bills to be paid. This is so that you, as a treasurer, are not stuck being the gatekeeper, saying thumbs up, thumbs down to any expense that comes by. You can present it to the board, and you as a board discuss it and decide whether those bills should be paid. So anytime you feel like the pressure is on you to make a decision, just remember that you can go back to the board. That's what PTA procedure is there for, to help all the officers and know that any decisions are team decisions, board decisions. And then make sure you're keeping track of your budget. And if you're able to present a budget versus actuals report, that would be great. But at least keep in mind any budget line items that you're kind of getting close to the limits. In that case, you may need to present a proposal for a budget change to your board to see how they feel about that. And is it a thing of, yes, we should increase this budget line item, or, oh, we should just stop spending those kinds of expenses. Reporting to the association, it's a little bit different. Again, you're presenting your treasurer's report. Then you want to make sure you present a list of checks or payments that have been made since the previous association meeting and present that for ratification. So even though expenses have been approved by the board, ultimately the association gets to see what happens with your financials. So make sure you present that for ratification. You're going to want to make sure that any new activities or programs and any changes to the budget are reported to the association and approved. And then we want to make sure that we release funds. So what that means is that even though at the beginning of the year, the association approved your budget, that is not permission to spend the money. So what you need to do is figure out which line items, what kinds of expenses you're going to need to spend up through your next association meeting. So for example, if we had an association meeting in October and then the next one isn't till January, you want to make sure you release the funds for those expenses that are going to happen up through January. And then again, if you can do a budget to actuals report, ideally, we want that to be at least quarterly so that the association can kind of see how you as PTA are doing, then go ahead and present that information too. All righty. I don't see any questions in the chat. I can't imagine that video was just so all-encompassing that all of your questions are answered. Oh, look at that. Bam.
Oh, wow. She was writing while you were talking.
I know.
When there is a transfer of funds from one checking account to a secondary checking account, what paperwork is needed? There is and I think it's in the paperwork, there is a transfer form between bank accounts. I'm not sure what page that it's on, but it's saying, you know, which account the money's coming from, which account it's going to, and then you have to have 2 check signer approvals and then authorization by the board to make that transfer. Can we have auto deposit from Square type accounts to the primary checking account, or do we need a secondary account to transfer funds from the outside world into our account? When we first started taking in like Totem, for example, a few years ago, it was suggested that a secondary or a second account, checking or savings, be opened in order to accommodate e-commerce. And the thought was that, well, if they have access to your account, they will also have access to withdraw funds or take funds as well. So that's when that started, but it was a recommendation. It wasn't required. And so some units did, some units didn't. I'm not sure if, yeah, Square does deposit the funds to your bank account directly. You don't have to draw them down. The only one that I know you have to draw down, and it may be even different now, is PayPal. PayPal, usually the funds stay in the PayPal account, and then you draw them down to your checking account. But that's the only one I know that does. I hope that answers your question. I wanted to reiterate something because a monthly bank reconciliation is required, and it's required by the insurance company in order to cover any losses, to use the fidelity bond part of the insurance package that we have. I've done, I want to say hundreds of audits or financial reviews for PTA. More often than not, the biggest error made is that units combine the treasury report and the bank reconciliation into one report. And so they don't report checks that have not cleared the bank on the treasurer's report. And we, emphasize that in the recording. And the treasury report is nothing more sacred than the sequentially numbered document. You want to make sure in your treasury report, your check numbers are in order, because it's easy to see if something is missing. But if you have checks, one check going in October, one check going in December, it's not correct. So your treasury report, as we said, needs to be everything that was deposited and issued in that month, regardless of the bank. The bank has no bearing on the treasury report at all. And then you'll have your separate bank reconciliation, and you will start with your treasurer ending balance and then list any outstanding checks or outstanding deposits. And then your ending balance, after you do that, should match your treasurer's report. Please do not commingle the treasurer report with the bank reconciliation. They're entirely different. And like I said, the insurance company requires a bank reconciliation monthly, signed by a preparer and a reviewer who is not a check signer, in order to be able to recoup any loss through the fidelity bond of your insurance. Okay, I just thought I'd throw that. Okay. On the treasurer's report, are you listing all the accounts in a single report, checking, savings, Square, PayPal, or in a separate treasury report for each one? A separate treasury report for each one is what you're going to do. Good question.
I'm going to jump in
and
on that.
Hold on.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. So in my PTEZ, it actually does report each account separately, but it's sort of listed all in one treasurer's report, which, since this is Sunny, you may have seen that at our executive board meetings. So I don't know if you want to clarify if your question is regarding that, or if you're saying that, oh, does it need to be on like separate pieces of paper, which no, it does not, but there does need to be an accounting for each separate account.
Yeah, I think I was a little bit confused, because I was like, but it's all in there. Like the reports that you guys have are all in there. And I wanted to make sure I was understanding that, like, again, essentially, although it's all in one set of documents, they're separate like reports. And in those reports, again, this is not my job. This is not what I do, but I'm trying to understand it. Let's say there's like 10 transactions in PayPal, right? And then there's the transfer out of the PayPal money into the bank account. Let's say there's 10 like 3 Spiritware transactions and 5 I don't know, some other fundraising transaction. And then it's transferred out to the bank account. So like, I assume in PTAZ, it just kind of, as long as you put it in, it'll do it all. But if you're doing things manually, is it better to transfer it out by like category? Okay, here's all the Spiritware ones. I'm going to transfer this as one transfer. Here's all of the fundraising ones. I'm going to transfer it as one transfer, so that when you're looking at it at the bank statement, it is easier to parse.
Yeah. Hi, Sunny. PayPal, your drawdowns would be in lump sum from PayPal to your bank account. And so you would post that to your My PTEZ based upon summary reports that you pull off the PayPal website, which separates the different income, the Spiritware, the membership, the donations. So you would attach, and in My PTEZ, you would prepare a balance adjustment for each category of income and attach that summary report from PayPal or Square or wherever it's from. Does that make sense?
That totally sounds like it makes sense. I've never used it, so like that sounds like it makes sense. I've never been a treasurer, so but I can have them reference your video and ask you guys some questions. Like I'm sure that there's like there must be a way to do it, right? Like you here, print this, grab this thing, put it here. I'm the more like, let's just like make sure your reports are right, not the details.
Yeah, that's right. And the details are on your PayPal reports, not on your PTAZ reports. So you attach your PayPal reports to your entry, saying $1,000 went to Spiritware. Here's the detail. 500 went to memberships. Here's the detail attached. You know what I'm saying? From your PayPal or Square account, you would pull the summary report and then post it.
I think I get it. Again, if I don't know if it's possible to have a sample. I'm one of those people that just needs to see it maybe, and then they're like, oh, duh. I'm pretty sure you got it. I think I got it, but anyway, thank you very much.
Alrighty, so
Okay.
you know how to reach us if you have further
Yeah.
questions. So there's a question about
Okay.
a unit paying Amazon directly by ACH, and is that allowable?
I would think so, because we are allowed to pay through ACH, other entities. So I would think that would be okay.
Yes.
Can a board member of the PTA fill taxes out for the unit? Okay, if you ordinarily make $50,000 or less in gross revenue, you're going to file what they call a 990N and a 199N. They're postcards. They're easy. And if you go to the CAPTA website, I know one of my colleagues is going to throw that up right now, Tax Support Center. If you look under electronic if you look under electronic filing, it'll give you videos exactly how to fill out the 990N postcard, the 199N, the RF1 and CTTR1. So we encourage, the treasurer, they are able to fill that out. I think the IRS doesn't even ask for a figure, and FTB, they ask for gross revenue. It's very easy. You just have to know the name and address of your unit pretty much. If you're making in excess of $50,000 up to $200,000, and then it's more after that, we highly, highly recommend that you use a tax accountant or an accounting firm to prepare your 990EZ and your 199. And they will automatically complete the RF1 and CTTR1, which goes to the Department of Justice. It's very easy to mess up if you don't know. And we had a unit one time that was in danger of IRS revocation because for 2 years they did it on their own and they forgot to put an X in a box. And so the IRS rejected it, but of course they don't tell you. And so they were in danger of revocation for 3 years, not submitting their 990EZ. So try to find that money somewhere and have it approved by your board and association to pay for an accountant. It would be worth your while. It runs about $500 for all three government agencies. And there it is. Also, we have a tax filing training. Oh, yeah, we do. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm gonna, if you have more questions, just keep putting them in the chat, but we're gonna do a little exercise. What's wrong with this treasurer's report? So if you see anything that seems incomplete or wrong, go ahead and toss your observations into the chat. Again, no math errors, so no need to bring out the calculators. It's all in how the presentation, how the information is presented. All right. There we go. Yes, there's a check from September when the period that's covered by this report is October 1st through October 31st. So this check here to Pam President is does not belong on this report.
I just want to say, Lisa, and that's what we were talking about, posting checks in the month in which they are written and not when they're cleared by the bank. So that September check, let's say, was cleared in the bank in October. It should not be on the October Treasury report just for that. It should be in the September report.
Okay, so Marcy mentioned that there are two transaction numbers that have 123 as a transaction number. There's this line here. These are actually the same transaction. There's the same deposit, but they're split up into the portion that belongs to the unit and the portion that's going to be forwarded to the council, right? So good observation, but it's actually not wrong. It's just sort of how the information is normally broken down on your reports. The dates, I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you want to clarify with a further message, that's fine. Money collected, I assume we're talking about this one on October 16th. Yes, we do want to be more specific than money collected. Some description, whether it's membership, whether it's spiritware sales or whatever. Yes, that's that. Because you want, when you're presenting this information to your board or to your association, you want them to understand, where's our money coming from? Where's it going out to? So this is obviously insufficient. Okay, let's see. What is the item that Pam President is going to? Yes, exactly. It says who the payee is here, but it does not say what she's getting paid for. All righty. Oops. It's missing balance on hand, beginning and ending. Well, I'm going to assume you're noting that it says bank statement balance here on the top and at the bottom, and we're not recording, doing our reports on the basis of the bank statement balance. We're doing it more on our balance on hand or checkbook balance, if you want to call it that. So yes, good observation there. 3068 description should be more specific. Right, someone had mentioned that there was nothing there about what was paid for. There we got that. Let's see. That one is pretty much it. Although this one, we will probably want to say who we're paying. It just says office supplies. So that's the description, but we should probably also be including the payee. So, and did we catch everything, Flora?
Yeah, Tracy is absolutely right. Identifying it's a balance, the book balance and not the bank balance. Very good.
All right. Stop sharing there. All righty. So are there any more questions? I think we've covered all the material that we wanted to. Again, as we mentioned in the beginning, there's lots more information in the PowerPoint handout that we sent you. So that's going to be maybe for more advanced information or maybe more detailed. So if there are no questions, then why don't we wrap it up?
We're at the conclusion, the end of our time today. We all want to thank everyone for joining us. We hope that this training has been helpful. For more information about PTA finances, please contact your council's financial officers or visit the website 33rdpta.org. And also for reference, California State PTA's website, capta.org. For recordings of previous trainings from 33rd, financial and otherwise, visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com. Channel name is 33rd District PTA. Also, our contact information is on page 2 of the handout that was emailed. If you have any additional questions or ideas for topics that you would like us to provide training on, email ptatraining@33rdpta.org.
All righty. Thanks, everybody.